Hello and welcome to the Chris and Bud Show. My name is Chris Scarborough, and with me is my co-host, my friend, and my brother in pod, Mr. Bud Bohannon. Together we'll be taking you on a nostalgic ride discussing a wide array of topics from our childhood through today, hoping to share a bunch of laughs along the way. No, not yet.
Can I go now?
Yeah, now.
It's time for the Chris and Bud Show.
Welcome back. Today is today. It's one of my favorite days, podcast day. But specifically today, we're talking about, as Bud says, wrestling.
Wrestling.
In my mind, I picture Hulk Hogan's like Real American, or Bret Hart's like that like screeching noise at the beginning when he first comes to walk out. That's what I picture that's going to happen. There's no sound because we can't afford to pay for it. But if we did, that's what would have been right there. It would have been like that screeching noise, like, hey, Brett. I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but that's what I remember.
No, it would have been
or the glass breaking.
When the glass breaks, that's your ass. Or no, what is it?
Yep.
When the glass shatters, that's your ass.
Yep. Yeah, that's all I can remember. That, yeah.
That's my
or
boy
the glass
right there.
Breaking. Yep. There's a lot of fond memories I have about wrestling, and I get filled with such joy just thinking about it, talking about it.
I know you did, because hell, when we went back to your house after your wedding, I was watching WWE Network.
Yep.
I tried to play Destiny, but I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah, it's so much better to watch some good shit. But so let's talk about the first time you watched wrestling, and then I'll jump into sort of like my 8 billion words that it'll take me to talk about wrestling. So obviously your experience in wrestling and my experience are completely 100% different. So I'll let you lead off, and then I'll run for an hour.
Well, I didn't have cable growing up, so the only wrestling that I could watch was SmackDown at the time, and I think I just found it. I think it used to come on at like 8 o'clock at night on Thursdays at the time. This was before it was Friday Night SmackDown, and I want to say the year I started watching it was like 1998, maybe 97. I'm not exactly sure. When I started watching, it was definitely the transition, like in between the Attitude Era, I guess. Like the people that I remember when I started watching it was people like Mankind, Stone Cold, The Rock, Undertaker, Triple H, Hardy Boys, Dudley Boys. You know, those people like Ric Flair and Hogan were way out of the picture whenever I started first watching it. I don't remember how I got into it. I think it was just something that I started watching while doing stuff. Like kind of how we talked about, you had the TV on for like background noise. I kind of think that's how it started out with me. And then I kind of just subconsciously picked in like these stories between all these different wrestlers. And then I remember once I got really big into it, then my mom would actually start watching it with me, which was pretty cool. I think that's about the start of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, mine is actually, like I said, completely different. So when I was a kid, it's like, to be honest with you, when I think of my first memories, like literally it's wrestling. Like it's kind of sad, but it's the truth. Like when I was growing up, my dad was, I think my dad was a younger guy. You know, they had kids pretty young. So I remember my dad was always watching it. This is pre-Raw or SmackDown or any sort of like national TV. So we're talking about just localized whatever was playing in Florida. What we did more than anything, a lot of it was just renting tapes. You know, because pay-per-view had just started. Mind you, pay-per-view I know really started in the mid 80s, but we're 32, so I was born in 88. So, you know, I didn't get into or started to remember wrestling until, you know, Hulk Hogan was on his downfall. But what I would do is you would watch these videotapes, and obviously as kids, you don't have any, like point of reference of timing. So you have no idea sort of like when Hulk Hogan actually was the big guy, right? And I'm watching, you know, whatever Wrestlemania it is, and 91, 92, 93, it may not be the one that currently happened, but I don't understand. I remember not understanding necessarily WrestleMania 9, which happened in like 91. You don't remember that being WrestleMania 9. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, it's just
I just
WrestleMania back then.
yeah. There was no, you don't have any point of context for the timing of when things happen
Not
like
when
we
you're
do
young.
now. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and what was so funny is I remember the first time I sort of like realized that it wasn't a movie, I guess, and that people can change was WrestleMania like 7. I think it was 7 or 8. Hulk Hogan wrestles Sid Justice in the main event. It might have been 8. What was so funny about it was I remember watching some older WCW and he was Sid Vicious. And I'm like, how the hell that's the same guy? And starting to realize that, you start to put a little bit of it together. What I would do is me and my brother would collect the little action figures. That was sort of our thing. And we would visit my cousin who lived in the panhandle of Florida every so often. And he was sort of he was my cutting edge cousin. So he would always be sort of ahead of the times. And he was one that sort of introduced me into like more of the blood and guts, which was WCW. They were more like, that was Ric Flair, his time period. He's huge in North Carolina. That's why I kind of giggled when you're like, I didn't get into wrestling until Stone Cold. And I'm like, wait. You have Ric Flair and you didn't get into wrestling until Stone Cold? I get it, like, because of how like localized or how sort of small of a town you grew up in. But me being,
I grew up on a hill, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, you know what I'm saying? Because he's like North Carolina. You can't really talk about North Carolina. You talk about like the big things in North Carolina. Ric Flair's in that list. You know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of funny.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is like when we're kids, you're not thinking about what represents your state, because that's not a point. That's not a point of conversation you really give a shit about. Not until you're older.
And he was a bad guy.
Not until you're older, then you start bragging like, yeah, well, my state is the birthplace of Pepsi Cola, so fuck you, every other state. My state's better.
Yeah. But I just remember. Oh, so like I watched. So the guy I always really liked was Macho Man, right? Randy Savage.
The Macho Man.
Yeah. Dig it.
What I remember when you were doing that shit at work, man. That was good stuff.
Yeah, we throw those out there. He always said, they always say the name, the Macho Man, Randy Savage, and they would say from Sarasota, Florida, which always it tickled me because that's where I was born. So like I had a weird connection with him just because it's like he's representing me. Not really, because he wasn't born in Florida, he wasn't born in Sarasota, but that's where he decided to choose to be where he was from. So I don't know. I would always be like, what? You get that little side, like, huh? Little side head, because you're like, is that really what he just said? And I remember asking my mom, and my dad was like, yeah, I used to play baseball. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. So then I guess you start connecting that there's athletes in it. But the first major event I recall when it comes to wrestling was definitely like the WrestleManias, man. Like obviously they weren't what they become or what they became after the Attitude Era. But those early years, I firmly believed that I was a WCW guy for a long time. And then that's when because that's what was in my area. WWF hadn't really spread to Florida just yet, in the early 90s. They didn't even launch Raw until 93. So, I wasn't very old. It was 6 when 93. So,
did you say 6 or dicks?
5 or 6. 6. I think we were like 5 or 6 when Raw actually launched.
Well, at least you weren't Dick's year old.
Yeah, I wasn't Dixon. So when we were watching the cartoon, when we were doing the cartoon one, I talked about on Saturday mornings I would watch wrestling, and the wrestling I was watching then was WCW, which was owned by Ted Turner, and I didn't have, like I said, point of reference for timing, so a lot of wrestling for me was about just enjoying those, like going to the video store, so going to a Blockbuster or a video library or family video, and going to one of those places and renting these older DVD. I'm sorry, they were VHSs back then. Renting these older VHSs, yeah, and getting to see, like for example, like Halloween Havoc in the early 90s. Obviously, the WWE Network makes this, well, now Peacock, whatever, makes it a lot easier. Yeah, terrible. I guess it's because it's, what is it, NBC? Is that who this is through?
Yeah, but still terrible.
Because of the Peacock, it's the stupid their logo. It's called the Peacock.
The little rainbow colored, looks like peacock feathers. Still terrible fucking name.
I agree.
You don't
But
put any kind of slander into your title of your company.
no.
Like, surely
Why don't
they
you
got
just-
to realize people know what the word cock is. And
Yeah.
pee, for that matter.
But I guess that's the home for the WWE network now. But, you know, watching those things now, I start thinking about, oh man, you get a point of reference of like timing versus then. But as a kid, you know, Sting, he was my favorite wrestler as a young boy. Man, I thought he was everything and then some.
Sting is the only thing I know from WCW. And I didn't even watch Sting wrestle. But he had such a name for himself. That's all I heard. That's all I correlated with WCW was Sting.
Yeah, and he did a great job of wheeling in like kids like me and my brother because WCW didn't do a great job of building a lot of baby faces. It was basically Sting and then a bunch of bad guys. They didn't because they had Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, like a lot of these like top tier guys who had been in the business for a long time, and their whole thing was what was so funny about WCW versus WWE was WWF was what they called a heel factory. So they had old Hulk Hogan at the top, and then they would just funnel in bad guys. WCW did the exact opposite. They had a heel champion in Ric Flair, and they just funneled in good guys. And Sting just was always the U.S. champ and would just kind of occasionally take that top spot. But yeah, I remember watching Great American Bash 90. It's either 90 or 91. I can't remember. Where he beat Ric Flair for the championship. And that was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. I was like so excited. I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. Unfortunately, not long after this, the business, as they say, it sort of went to a downturn. And that was when I was starting to become like my middle years, like 8, 9, 10. I was starting to kind of develop a little bit. I would still watch it, but I wasn't looking for it. But I remember a lot of like really pay-per-views is really what was important, right? Because you're getting to see a bunch of different stuff and you didn't have any relevance of like when things were happening. So a lot of what we were doing in this time period was just watching tapes. It was about, I don't know, 95 or 96 is when I got into Raw. It had already been around for a little while, but this is when but it came on at 9 on a Monday, which is pretty late for, an early, like an 8-year-old kid. Hey mom, can I stay up till 9 o'clock watching freaking wrestling? And then they had La Femme Nikita come on after, which was like a little more like sexy,
And pay-per-views were hell. I remember WrestleMania used to run till like midnight or some shit.
Yes, on a Sunday, which I thought was crazy. But yeah, so what would happen was, I remember, what was it? So they started doing in your houses. I think it was 90 into 95, beginning of 96, something like that.
Not in my
and they
house.
were cheaper. Well, not mine either. But that's what the name of the pay-per-view was called. And it was a little bit cheaper. So I was like, hey, Dad, can I get this pay-per-view? And he's like, what? And I was like, I want to watch the pay. And so my dad started watching wrestling with me to kind of see what I was watching, I guess. He was a little concerned. And
it was probably more like, what the hell's a pay-per-view?
Yeah, I didn't want to spend the money on it because it was like $24.99, I guess. And a normal pay-per-view, yeah. It might have been a little bit cheaper than that. 95, 96, something like that.
That's still strong.
Because pay-per-views, yeah, they got pretty expensive. It could have been $19.99. And then the regular pay-per-views were like $24 or $29.99, something like that. But what I did was, the Royal Rumble was always one of my favorites.
I mean, the back to the pricing thing is like, I guess that's not too awful bad when you consider how much like a pay-per-view fight is nowadays.
Yeah,
I'm
just about $60. Yeah,
I'm just so spoiled now because we have all these streaming services, where you pay $10 a month and you get all this content, or even the WWE Network. You pay $10 a month and you get all that content, and then they want you to spend
plus the month
probably
of yeah.
What would it be, about $40 now for inflation? Probably.
It was. I think they were close to $60. WrestleMania was $60, I think.
So that'd probably be about $100 event now, right?
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, for what you pay for the WWE Network, now it's bundled with Peacock. But what you would have paid for the WWE Network, you could have gotten is basically $120 a year. Is basically WrestleMania, and you get it for it's bundled with it. So yeah, it's completely different. What we would do though is, of course, we had a VHS player, so we'd record them so we could watch them later. And I don't think I've watched any pay-per-view more than I watched Royal Rumble 1996. That was my favorite pay-per-view for the longest time. Me and my brother. Well, what was so fun was, you got to remember, like we knew who was coming in, when they were coming in, who was gonna, we already knew all the who's, what's, where's, why, and when, but we still enjoyed the Royal Rumble. At the time, they didn't even really release VHS tapes for you to be able to purchase, really. So you didn't get as many opportunities, I guess. So I just remember watching that one. That's one that Shawn Michaels wins.
No, the only thing they released back in that time was the biography videos, because I remember I had
Stone they weren't
Cold
really
videos.
doing those. Yeah, I'm gonna look it up, make sure I'm right here. 95. I think he wins both of them, 95 and 96, because Austin wins 97. What's so funny is I remember I never really correlated Stone Cold Steve Austin with Stunning Steve Austin from WCW. I don't know why I never did. At least when I was, because it was a totally different presentation. So it was kind of funny to kind of have that sort of the biggest superstar to ever grace WWE ever couldn't get a foothold in WCW.
Well, same difference when he came.
Crazy.
Same difference when he came to WWF and he was the ringmaster.
Yeah.
I don't know if I.
Yeah, he struggled.
I don't know if I wasn't watching at that time, but I never known him as the ringmaster. I've always known him as Stone Cold.
Yeah, so obviously, like I said, there was no time. I don't watch timelines, so but he was in the '96 Royal Rumble as the ringmaster, which was like, huh? So it was kind of funny to kind of see his character develop. This is when I was starting to get really into it. I really liked Bret Hart. I really liked Shawn Michaels because he was really like sort of flamboyant. Obviously, he becomes the bad guy later on, and that's who Steve Austin beats to become the champion. But
yeah, Shawn Michaels did a lot of carrying WWF on his back for a long time.
Yeah, especially in this time period because of the quote unquote business was down. But he was drawing pretty good, and he was such a damn good wrestler. I mean, at the end of the day, he got a lot of people who probably didn't deserve. Like he helped make Kevin Nash a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? Like no matter how he wants to, or Diesel in WWE.
Yeah. He helped a lot of wrestlers have some very good matches.
Yeah, did you rewatch all of WrestleMania 17?
All the good matches.
Or did you just pick and choose? Yeah, you just pick and choose. So what was so funny is we joked about doing this topic for a long time. Bud had mentioned that he was interested in rewatching WrestleMania, and he wasn't sure which one, I don't think. And when I was like, and he mentioned 17, I said, that's probably the best WrestleMania that ever was produced. We started looking at the match lineup, and we're like, holy shit, maybe it was. We're getting a little ahead of my timeline, but I can't put it into words once like Stone Cold started to kind of tip the scales. So I remember watching King of the Ring, 1996, and that's where Austin 316 was born, right?
Yeah.
Because he beat Jake the Snake Roberts.
You sit there and thump your Bible and say your whatnots. Talk about your songs, your John 3:16s. Well, Austin 3:16 says, I just whooped your ass.
Yes. And the funniest part is the guy holding the mic is Doc Hendricks, is what his name was in WWE, but he was Michael Hayes in the NWA and World Class and a lot of other places. So it's kind of funny to have him in his little like his DJ and I'm Doc Hendricks, So it's kind of funny to and then have him hold the stick for Austin while he gives that speech. And what's so funny is he didn't think anything of it, thought it was just going to pass over. And he said that the next night on Raw, he saw like all these Austin 316 signs in the crowd. And he was like, holy shit. I can't remember who. Flying Brian, or Brian Pillman, as he was called in the WWE. He said, you're a babyface, kid. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm a fucking heel. And he's like, no, you're not. He didn't want to be a babyface. He wanted to stay heel, but it came at the perfect time, man. Like we're talking, obviously Shawn Michaels was carrying the company on his back, and you had the Undertaker, who was a very established character. I remember watching him I remember the first time I saw the Undertaker, and he got a title shot against Hulk Hogan, and he beat him at Survivor Series, I think it was. And I was like, holy crap. Ric Flair helped, of course. He's with a chair and whatnot. Doesn't matter. Hulk Hogan don't do no jobs, bro. At least not without a rematch on the clause, anyway.
I mean, think
it's
about
kind
it.
of funny to kind of see that.
You hadn't seen somebody quite as, I guess, big come into
imposing,
come into wrestling until Andre the Giant, which was obviously way before Undertaker.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple other like massive humanity, but like he had this like just his aura about him. You can't explain it, I mean, obviously Hulk put him over. He helped him out a lot, because had he not beaten him, I don't know if it would have mattered. I remember I'm kind of all over the place, and that's how I'm going to be talking about wrestling. But right after that, they had Yokozuna, and man, I remember his little run leading into WrestleMania 9, where he wrestled Bret Hart, and it's amazing what Bret Hart just like Shawn Michaels, what Bret Hart pulled out of I'm sorry, not the Undertaker, out of Yokozuna just to get a great match on paper, and then obviously losing unfortunately to Yoko, and then have Hulk Hogan run out and win the title, which I thought was still a sham. Anyway, I really enjoyed Bret Hart. It's funny because we're going to talk about the Attitude Era, probably the bulk of what we're talking about here when it comes to wrestling in general, and we'll probably not jump around quite as much. The funny thing is that both Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, what you knew them as, were bad guys because that's who they were, the bulk of the Attitude Era, which is so funny because they were like the quintessential babyface through most of this time period right before the Attitude Era. But for me, wrestling has always been like a source of like such excitement and such joy. They had sort of WWE was always kind of like joked as being like the kid friendly version. Around this time, ECW had sort of opened, and this was, like I said, pushing my blood and guts sort of thought processes and the things that I enjoyed at that time. And they did a good job of sort of like pushing you in certain directions. I sort of found my limits, so to speak. But I guess the gimmick match has always attracted me personally. When I was a kid, like the War Games and stuff, when this is NWA/WCW, there's nothing more iconic than like pictures of Ric Flair with the big gold belt and his like hair is soaked in blood, and because he's got that platinum blonde hair, and it's just a sight that I can never forget. It's like embedded in my brain, just like when Bret Hart and Austin wrestled that WrestleMania 13, and Austin's doing that like reaching for the ropes and his head's up and the blood starting to gush out of his head.
That was a good moment.
That iconic moment. Yeah, where he's like doesn't want to submit to the sharpshooter. Oh, like that gets you in your feels, man.
And that helped push Stone Cold too, because the fans are like, holy shit, this guy will never quit. Like he passed out. He didn't quit.
Yep. And that was the cool thing. So what was so funny about that moment was it was what they call a double turn. So Bret Hart walked in as the babyface and Austin walked in as the heel. Austin walked out as a babyface and Bret Hart walked out as a heel. That's not easy to do because you're trying to convince them to hate one person and love another. And it's not always easy to do, especially with storytelling. But like you said, it catapulted Austin from being like kind of right to the cusp. Like it's almost that time. Man, I tell you, the Attitude Era was something else. We'll just jump right into it because really it's the most important part. And it's really our time period, right? Like you're talking 97 through like 2001, 2002 maybe.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like where
right when John Cena come in, he'd been there for maybe a year or two, and then they switched over to that PG stuff they're still on now.
Yep. Yeah, so I think it might have been 90. I was starting 96, probably till 2001. So about a 5-year period, I'd say maybe. Because you got D-Generation X, and this people. It's so funny. I don't know if this happened in your schools, but this is so ridiculous to think about. But there was literally kids getting in trouble because they were doing the suck it sign to their teacher. Like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. Just think about those time periods. Because 96, I was like in 3rd grade, man.
Yeah, we used to do.
So we're talking.
We used to do wrestling moves on the trampoline and like in the pool in the lake.
Yeah. So that was, I think, for me and my brother, because we were so close in age, that was like something we really enjoyed. Like we enjoyed we didn't know that it was predetermined and not everything is as it seems.
Fake.
But we won't call it fake. Come on now.
I'm just saying what everybody's thinking.
Yeah, I don't buy it. So there's a big difference between like.
I'm not going to call it fake either because, obviously, getting suplexed through a steel cage at Hell in a Cell or some bullshit. There's no way you can fake a 20-foot fall.
Yeah, fake's not. I don't get upset. People can say whatever they want to, but it always used to hurt me when I was a kid because it's like it's not really fake, bro. Like I've seen these guys bleed, even if they're nicking themselves. They're not doing the quote unquote hard way. It's still not fun. Like, yeah, you ever try to prick yourself to make you bleed? It's not exactly the best thing to do. And then those bumps, man. Yeah, go ahead and just even lay flat on a damn trampoline. Jump straight up in the air and lay flat on a trampoline. That shit ain't fun either. It jars your neck, and it's just not a good time.
Not at our rightful age of 32.
No, definitely not now, for sure.
And just think,
See my dumbass out on the trampoline.
in people in their early 30s, that's their prime career time in wrestling.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're what they call, you're trying to figure it out, right? So,
You had
but
Undertaker's
really, me and
old
my
ass
brother,
wrestling when he was, what, 50?
yeah, more than that. I think he was like into his. Well, Ric Flair wrestled into his early 60s, I think. But it just depends, man. You change it with the times, right? It's a lot of it is just like you say. It's not. There's not a lot of realism to it sometimes, but it's not necessarily that. It's the theatric of the mind, as they say. It's all about the enjoying the moment, a suspension of disbelief. All these little sayings they have, and no one did it better than Austin in terms of causing me to suspend my disbelief. But me and my brother, we would just wrestle all day long. Like it's crazy just to think about it. Me and him, we would just go out in the freaking. We'd do it out in the damn parking lot. There's a parking lot in front of my aunt's house, and it was for some kind of medical facility. And there was like this. We used to play football in this it was, I don't know. It was only like maybe 50, 60 feet long, and it's like 10 feet wide. But we would just play. It was like just a little spot with grass, no trees, nothing, near the edge of the parking lot. And no one really parked down there because this parking lot was like 10 times bigger than the facility itself. Like I'd never seen anyone park at the back end of there. So we would just hang out over there and we would just wrestle each other, throwing forearms and suplexing each other onto the damn ground. Like we were crazy people. But we had a blast. Then we got to where we would, this is ridiculous. So we had how they made the dummies, but they're not big enough, and we were too big. So my mom somehow found this dog. It was a stuffed animal, but he was like 4 feet tall. This dude was like as tall as me, and me and my brother would wrestle against the dog and somebody else, and we'd be like on a team. We'd be having a blast, man. We'd be selling. We'd take a punch from the dog,
Don't you wish you go back to them times in life?
You aren't kidding, man. Hell, there was days we'd wrestle pillows just because we needed a quote unquote bad guy to wrestle, and we made up our own names and all kinds of stuff. Man, thinking about those times just brings back so much. I can't remember mine. I always wanted to go. I always went with Criss Cross. They were a huge, the little rap group because my name was Chris. So I went with Criss Cross, and it sounds so cheesy thinking about it now, but yeah, that was mine. I don't remember my brother's. He was always, you've met my brother before. He's kind of a quiet guy. I don't know what his name was, but we would always, I think we called each other, we were the Hellraisers. That was our tag team name. The Hellraisers.
You got that off of a video game, didn't you?
I'm sure we did. We had too much fun playing. Anyway, and then the other thing that we would do, other than just wrestling that, we had, like I said, we had the figures, the action figures, and, we would pair them up and we would tell storylines, and we would have champions, and we would crown new champions, new tag champions, all that stuff. And that's sort of that's when we started to get immersed into a lot of what wrestling is. And then obviously the video games finally caught up, but that wasn't until the early or late 90s, early 2000s. But I'm talking even before then, a lot of this stuff happened because my parents bought a house and we moved, and I think it was 2000. That particular year is when me and my brother got our own room for the first time, or not our own room, but a bigger room for the first time. And we did a lot of with this when we would pull the mattresses off the bed and we would throw all the covers down and we'd wrestle fucking 7 hours, we'd be sweating as not even teenagers. We're pouring sweat because we're wrestling all damn day long. My parents would come in yelling for dinner, clean this shit up. We always just wanted to be, that's something we always wanted to do when we were kids. We realized it probably wasn't going to happen for a 5'8" guy and a 5'9" guy out of shape and not looking all that good. But when we were kids, it sounded awesome. And then, I remember, this is funny. I remember when Nitro launched. It launched in 95 or 96, something like that. But they had Jaws play, and it was only the second time on TBS or TNT. I'm sorry, Jaws, which is only the second time I'd ever seen the movie, was on first, came on before it, and I was I didn't even really care to watch Jaws. I was just waiting for Nitro to launch. I remember watching the whole movie, and I got scared. Obviously, I got scared a couple times because that was kind of how the movie worked. Considering it was 95 and I was, well, how old were we in 95? Like 10?
Not that
We
old.
don't
That'd
have
be
all the,
98.
okay, so we were 7. So
Yeah.
it's even better. Makes me sound like less of a loser. Getting scared watching Jaws. But at that time period, we're talking about a totally different scenario than today, of course. Like, you can't consume whatever you want when you want. Then you had to wait. It came on at 8, and I think Jaws was at like 6. So and it was on Mondays. So you're just kind of waiting for it to come on. So we watched Jaws and waiting for it to come on. And then I remember the first match was Flying Brian versus Juice and Thunder Liger. And I thought Juice and Thunder Liger was like the coolest fucking guy ever. He's in a full body suit with this, like, got these horns on his mask and like hair coming out. And I was like, dude, this guy is freaking sweet. And just like the cool moves they did. I don't even remember anything else about it. I'm sure if I watched it, some other stuff. I know the end, Lex Luger shows back up and he's like, because he had just been on WWE TV like the week before. And like I guess his contract was up, so he just showed up on WCW on the first Nitro. Hulk Hogan, I think, is the champ at the time, so I was like, whatever. But that was there finally starting to hit it. But it's going to be a lot of bouncing back and forth because this is when it started to kind of get good. Because once Nitro was launched and you had Nitro and you had Raw kind of playing, what happened was you had this competition starting to brew. And for me as a kid and my brother, we're both pretty young. WCW came on at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for us because we're in the Eastern Time Zone. From 8 to 9, we would watch exclusively WCW, of course, and then Raw didn't come on until 9. So from 9 to 10, we'd be flipping back and forth. And like, this is, obviously people are channel surfing at all times. That's why they call it channel surfing, because you're flipping back and forth and you're just looking for something else to watch. But we had a lot of fun just like with that.
Waiting for the TV guide to finish scrolling.
Man, dude, it's so funny to think about this time period. And there was no direct TV fucking the guide now where you just hit the button and it tells you everything that's playing right now. I'm sure it's not just direct TV. I'm sure everyone has Spectrum. All of them have the same TV now where the guide is built into the actual program of the TV, service. Back then, that was not the case. You had to either have a TV guide or you had to go to the TV guide channel.
I wouldn't know. I still don't have cable.
Well, bud, I did. I don't have cable anymore either. I have sold out of cable, but my grandmother, that was sort of her thing. She like refused to not have cable, so she always had cable. And DirecTV was the first one I knew that had the guide built in so that you didn't have to watch the channel. Either way, you still had to wait for it to come on. Now you don't have to, but back then you still had to.
Yeah, my Gmail had DirecTV.
Yeah, old people love their cable.
I can relate.
Yeah, it's the same thing for like kids and Netflix, right? Like, there's no like, hey, do you have Netflix? There's just an assumption there.
Yeah,
everybody has Netflix.
Just like a cell phone.
That's how it was. Yep, that's how it was back in this time period when it come to cable. For the most part, it's like, it's not like, do you have cable? It's like, hey, I was watching this, even though it wasn't available on without cable, as if it's just a normal thing for people to have.
Yeah, and I had to be that kid that was like, nah, I ain't got cable, dude.
Loser,
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But once they were both launched, it was a lot of back and forth, and that was a lot of fun for us because you got to watch. Usually in the first hour for WCW, they did the luchadors, so we got to watch a lot of like Rey Mysterio when he was young. Oh my gosh, the stuff he did in WWE was a lot more, was far tamer than he did in like WCW. He did some crazy shit. One day, I've been talking to Bud about trying to watch some old pay-per-views just to kind of make him watch some with me, and that might be something we do in the future. But like Halloween Havoc, Eddie Guerrero and Eddie versus, who was I talking about? Rey Mysterio. Oh my goodness, it'd be great. It'd be a good time to go back and watch some of those, because I think sometimes we don't think about some of the, since you didn't watch WCW, you have no point of reference for like what would be good. But I'll send you a clip. Anyway, so we got to watch a lot of those where Eddie Guerrero was a young guy too. So these guys were developing, and they would go on to become major superstars in WWE later on. But this time period, that's what was kept. And the cool thing was they aired in the first hour. So then I didn't have to watch any of the middle crap because it was all crap on WCW. So I would watch WWE. And, that's when Austin was starting to hit his stride. I'll be honest, he was he's always been my favorite. You know, especially in the Attitude Era, and then you know, no one ever. You know, it's like that. The first video game you fell in love with, or the first whatever you fell in love with. That was kind of Austin for me. Sting was my first, I guess, but I didn't ever have a super attachment to him like maybe like I did with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He sort of transcended the sport.
Y'all on a first name basis?
Yeah, him and our buddies. Yeah,
no. Steve.
Me and old Steve over here. I remember, you know how shit you remember. What's so funny is for Christmas we got two like not plaques, but like because we were so into wrestling. My mom just bought us anything she could find for wrestling for. I don't remember what year it was, for like the first Christmas after we moved. So it must have been 2000. And I got a Stone Cold Steve Austin, like little poster that was framed and everything. And then my brother got The Rock. Yeah. And my brother got The Rock and he was like half pissed because, I mean, don't get me wrong. That was just about as good as he can get, you know, but that wasn't his favorite. He would have been far happier to have gotten a Stone Cold Steve Austin one as well. He is something else. Yeah, let's see if we can find it here.
That was mine.
Mine was, yep, I think that was mine as well, actually, oddly enough. It was cool as shit, too. My goodness. There's got some cool photos on there. What's so funny is, you know, Austin, he didn't need a great body, but he definitely had one, too, with the whole, he had some abs going there a couple times, even though he was down in all that damn beer, wasn't he?
I think what set it for him is his shoulders were massive.
Yeah.
He had that really stalky look.
Yeah, he was built from he had some thick legs too, so that helped him too. But yeah, so what kind of worked for you when Attitude Era hit? I was obviously Austin, right? Like that was kind of the thing for you, right?
Well, I mean, it was Austin and Rock, like their whole rivalry. That was just so good for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, you had these other guys that I had attachments to, like Triple H and Big Show, Kane, Undertaker. You know, those were my main people that I enjoyed. And then there were some secondaries, like I liked the Hardy Boys, I liked Dudley Boys, I liked Mankind, you know, Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon, that whole thing. I didn't really get much into the whole women's division, mainly because, like, I don't know. Even to this day, I feel like the female wrestlers, I don't know how to say it without pissing somebody off, so I just won't say it. Their matches aren't very good.
I'll say it slightly for you. So, especially in the time period we're talking about, it was all just supposed to be eye candy. They weren't really. I mean, it was a lot of underwear, bra and panty matches, that sort of shit. I do agree that it's not the same, but I also, to some extent, enjoy not every women's wrestling match, but a lot of them, especially the really good ones.
Well,
they remind me of
now.
This time period. Yeah. Current product today, they don't have all the flips and frills and all the bullshit sometimes, that it's just a wrestling match. So it kind of reminds me of not necessarily like an Austin versus Rock, but like an Austin versus somebody where the goal is to tell a story, have a beginning, middle, and end, get out of there. Not all this like, I got to do a 720 split, jump back forth.
The thing is, like, in a lot of the women's matches, like, I see them botch a lot of moves.
They do,
like, Like, you see it occasionally, like, with the male performers, you know, and there's just some people that are really bad about it. But most of the women are really good about botching a lot of moves. And it's just hard to sell it to me.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, this is a joke. This is I'm gonna tie it in here. When I was a kid, I remember watching like the Steiner brothers, and I don't remember who they were wrestling, but one time he didn't get up. Let's just put a name. Let's just say it was Booker T. I don't think it was Booker T, but let's just say it was Booker T. Just give a face.
Can you dig?
And he was going to try to do like
sucker.
Sucker. Yeah. So it definitely wasn't him. Because he's not stocky enough, but we'll just use him as an example.
That's something else we didn't mention too. Like, probably that hooked our interest is all these silly catchphrases and stuff that people used in their gimmicks. You know, their character.
Oh, you aren't kidding. Yeah. But in that moment, so Austin, the funny thing, or not Austin, Jesus Christ. So I guess the difference was they could hide it. So, like, for example, if he couldn't get him up for a belly to belly suplex, right? And he's trying to flip over Booker T, but Booker T just they weren't on the same page. then you just think, oh man, the struggle. Like Booker T countered the move a little bit because of the struggle. But when you're jumping on a top rope for a move that doesn't really make sense, and then you slip on the fucking rope and fall on the ground, and then the guy's got to try to cover it up for you. Yeah, it. I think that's part of it. So they're trying to do stuff that maybe, if the ropes are a little wet or whatever, it's easier to slip and fall. Back then, they didn't do a whole lot of high flying flips and
Or
stuff.
or like when Brock Lesnar tries to do a fucking backflip off the top rope and lands on his fucking head.
Yeah. What's so funny is he definitely has done that. They said that he would do a full flip, like complete backflip, land on his feet. Like he's such a freak of nature anyway.
Yeah, he's done that shooting star press multiple times before he landed on his head.
Yeah, he did. Which just happened to happen at WrestleMania.
Yeah, but a guy of that size, it's still pretty freakish to see him doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What's so funny is, like you said, you were talking about. I know we're bouncing back and forth, but you were talking about catchphrases, and like you said, that you basically said exactly verbatim what Austin said at the King of the Ring. And that became a catchphrase. Austin 316, and means I just whipped your ass. And
give me a hell yeah.
Give me a hell yeah. What?
Open up a can of whoop ass.
What? Tapping on his watch, his imaginary watch. What?
And how he played to the crowd with that stuff. Like I think there's like one promo where he's talking about like, go down to the bar. What? Grab a shot of rum. What? Tequila. What? Jim Beam. What? Like he played off the crowd so well whenever he did that whole stupid shit.
That's what you would call a master class in how to control an audience, is definitely Austin in like 2002, 2003. Because I think 2001 to 2003, that time period.
Austin and The Rock both. Yeah.
Yeah, Austin. Rock, his funny thing was he just knew how to caress them where he needed them. Austin could interact with them the whole time. Rock got there eventually, but
my problem with The Rock is a lot of his audience interaction and I guess his promos, they always came off corny to me. Like even when I was a kid.
Yeah, he I think he relied too much on like the making fun of people. So in a lot of ways you just sort of you're like, okay, but then when you lose to him, then you lost to whatever you made fun of him, right? You called him a Rudy Poo candy ass. So you just lost to the Rudy Poo candy ass. So does it really do you any good? Austin never really did that. And he always had the intensity. Yeah, that's why I always preferred Austin.
He would always just say, I'm going to stomp a mud hole in you and walk you dry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I liked about Austin was first of all, he never lost. But when he lost, it was in bullshit fashion. So they protected him a lot. And I always like the buildup. I think that, it's so funny. We haven't even mentioned really Vince McMahon, but
yeah, that's
him as a heel and a foil, right?
Yeah, that's what set his legacy in stone right there, is that rivalry between him and Vince. Because how many people were living vicariously through Stone Cold? You get to beat the shit out of your boss.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think that was record. So obviously it's hard to measure numbers now, but they were drawing like 8.5s, 8.6s every night. We're talking about what Super Bowl numbers are. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not talking about, this is on cable TV. So it's one of those where it just, you can't put into words sort of how big it was. Like, and the thing is like even people who, like, for example, me, I was a wrestling fan. So like when this was happening, it wasn't like, oh, I should be watching this. It was like, oh yeah, I've been watching this forever. This is great. So, but like everybody, like I had kids coming to me, hey man, you watch wrestling? And it's like, what? You watch wrestling? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it was a wild time period in our lives, especially as kids, that it was just so big. Everybody. And and we mentioned TV Guide earlier, and I think I mentioned this when we were talking about the cartoon episode, that they were on the cover of TV Guide, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
And Austin was on the cover of basically every magazine you could think of at some point. He just didn't have the glamour. The Rock, he has those chiseled, that chiseled look, and he's probably a little bit more camera appealing. Obviously, right? He's the biggest movie star in the world right now.
Yeah.
The cool thing about it is that they were on the same they're on the same playing field, right? Did you get to watch Austin Rock 2? Did you finish that match in WrestleMania 17?
Yes.
What'd you think?
I think it was done
I can't
very
remember.
well because they.
Is that the one where Austin turns?
Yeah, where Austin went heel
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they started using each other's finisher moves, and The Rock would kick out of every fucking thing, so it was like super suspenseful.
Yep.
And then Vince walked down there and
Did
broke up.
did Rock put on the Austin vest? Is that the one he put the vest on?
No,
That must be 3. I can't remember, but there's one where he somehow they start the match. Austin still has his vest on, and somehow Rock gets the vest, and Rock puts the vest. Oh, has to be the third one. And then he puts the vest on, and he's like fighting each other.
Is that the same one where he puts the vest on and then he takes the camera from the camera guy and picks up and points the camera right at Stone Cold, and he just flips him off and stuns him right on the announce table?
Yes. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's the third in 2003.
Yeah, that was a good moment.
19. Yeah, that one was more like what they call haha and like less action. Obviously, that was Austin's last real match in the. That would be a cool trilogy to watch and just have a good talk about that one. That'd be fun because those three series of matches, it's amazing. Just kind of what they did and the hype and the build up. Did they show up? Is that the one that had My Way 17, the Limp Bizkit song when they were doing the whole intro?
Yeah,
that was 17, right?
Yeah,
before the match. Yeah. Man, talk about this gives me goosebumps. I love this time period in wrestling, and I especially love Austin Rock because you only got it like 3 times really, and that was at 15, 17, and 19, and it was every other year, which is insane to think about too, right? That it wasn't a trilogy and it wasn't in order. One of the crazy things, I think it was the last WrestleMania 19, I think Austin got a really bad staph infection and he almost didn't make the pay-per-view, and he was like, I'm fucking going no matter what, you know? Austin's like, I don't miss pay-per-views, you know?
Well, it's like his King of the Ring debut. He had participated in a match earlier that night, and he got busted open, and he went to the hospital, and he said while he was on the way back from the hospital, he phoned in and said, hey, what did Jake say in his promo? So he came up with that response on that trip back to the arena.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, he got his lip busted open and they couldn't get the swelling to go down or something, so he had to be stitched up. Which isn't that crazy that they took him to a hospital in his uniform, in his little tighties, his little tights, you know?
Yeah, this
took him
is
to the fucking hospital.
This is before they had medical personnel, I guess, in the building. Like now, you know, if somebody gets busted open, they got a whole team of doctors back there for the guys.
They just stitch him up on the spot. But yeah, then he had to go to the hospital, and then he had to come back. And that's when he found out about Jake's promo about the whole. This is during his when he's trying to be sober. Thank God he finally found a way. He's still alive today. I think that's one of the sad things about watching some of this old wrestling is like you realize how old you are, and then you realize that most of these people are unfortunately passed away. But yeah, one of the cool things about this time period, like you said, was I felt like they had more freedom to kind of like do stuff, right?
Well,
you got any fond memories?
It was a lot less scripted back then too.
Yeah, 100%.
They gave the performers a lot more free reign to do their promos and stuff like that. Whereas, you know, nowadays everything's pretty much written out for them to say.
Scripted, yeah. I think that's why I don't watch Raw and SmackDown these days, is because I just don't care about I enjoy the matches, but I don't necessarily enjoy the hype or the build up because they just don't do a good job anymore.
Well, see, it's funny you say that because I'm kind of the opposite. Like I still watch Raw and SmackDown now, but I just fast forward through all the matches. And the main reason I do it is because there's currently a wrestler in there now by the name of Braun Strowman. And he grew up in a city that's about 20 minutes away from me, which is pretty sweet. I don't know him personally, but he did go to the same school that I went to. And like I said, he grew up 20 minutes down the road. So, you know, it's pretty cool to see somebody that close to where you live, you know, make something of themselves, become that popular. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And have held the world champion. Regardless of it being predetermined, it doesn't matter. They put some... You know, they said that they were willing to put the reins behind him, you know, and that's still pretty cool.
Yeah, and
they were giving them that opportunity.
He's had some pretty cool moments too, wrestling. Like he's, you obviously this stuff is fake. Like he flipped over an ambulance and, he brought down like a whole rigging area. Like winning the tag team championship with a 12-year-old at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
But they've had some pretty cool moments
ridiculous.
with them.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, I remember I remember talking about him at Walmart when we saw Walmart, and I was like, man, they just signed a guy out of Cheryl's Ford of all fucking places, and they're like, I guess he had been a professional
He was a
strongman,
strongman, amateur
yeah,
strongman. Yeah,
yeah. And I was like, really? I was like, well, I hope he does well. He's kind of fits the mold of what WWE wants, right?
Big and scary.
Yep. And so I'm sure he's got a long career ahead of him as long as he wants to do it. This time period now, if we fast forward a little bit through like the Attitude Era, what was cool about the Attitude Era was, like you said, it wasn't as scripted, but it did a great job of like letting it, I don't know, you felt like you got to know people, right? Like obviously we don't, but you felt like you knew who these people were and everybody was over and everybody was a superstar, even though maybe some of them wouldn't have ever become one in different time period. But obviously, the person leading the pack is Austin. Obviously, he's the best of the best when
Yeah.
it comes to like he made me buy merch and stuff that I never buy merch.
He was the Goku of WWE.
Yeah, very much so. He took a lot of ass kickings, but you know what? He always won in the end, right?
Yeah.
Then we go through like we're gonna kind of speed through the rest of this, but you go through into like the ruthless aggression era, and I think I fell off a little bit during this time period because I was
you mean the toothless aggression?
Yeah, well, we don't want to talk. That one's a tough one to talk about. That this time period was.
I don't care what you say. He was a good wrestler. All that stuff aside.
Yes,
and I'm only
gonna wrestling.
I'm only going to talk about him in a wrestling format. I'm not going to bring personal values and stuff into it. He was a good wrestler, though.
That's a tough one. Yes, he very much was, and I was glad to see him finally get his opportunity because if you watch any of his matches, you realize he was one of those where you're like, maybe it is fake, but not when he's in there. You know what I'm saying? And the he we're talking about is Chris Benoit, of course.
Chris Benoit,
which is tough to talk about, or Benoit, yeah.
I mispronounced his name for a long time.
Yeah, he was great. Kurt Angle, he was in the Attitude Era, but we don't give him enough credit. He was awesome. Unfortunately, he spent more time in TNA than he did in WWE. But he was one of my favorites.
Did you know he won the gold medal with a broken freaking neck?
Yeah, he told us every day. But I remember him doing a rap with John Cena, and that was one of his catches. Was and I won a gold medal with a broken freaking neck, like something like that. It's pretty funny. That was, I think, the best part about Kurt Angle.
Interesting when I watched that WrestleMania 17.
Yeah,
Kurt Angle had a match against Chris Benoit.
Yeah,
and this was before all the "You Suck" chants came with his title or his theme music.
Yeah, his theme song. Yeah,
and he was still a heel.
Yeah, I don't know when that started. I thought it would have already started, but WrestleMania 17 was 01, right? So that was. I felt that would have sort of already happened, but maybe because he had already been the champion and everything. So I don't know. That's weird. Maybe it wasn't until the Team Angle, which was in like 2002 or 2003, something like that.
Yeah,
maybe so.
I liked all the funny segments that he did with Stone Cold, like when Stone Cold
oh my goodness
was out the door kind of wrestling, and he was like, like the whole co-general manager and sheriff and all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember Angle with his mini fucking cowboy hat on.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Yeah. Oh man, I think that's when Austin got to show a side of him that was hilarious too, because he's a terrible singer, but he's like trying to serenade Vince McMahon, and he's playing a guitar and he's singing like Kumbaya and stuff.
And it's so bad, and he's like, "Hang on, I'm out of tune."
Yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah, he was putting out some really great content then, and then of course, like you said, Austin. This is during a time period where he had a bad neck and he had 2 bad knees, and he was kind of winding his career down. But they put him in a lot of different ways to sort of let him still be there without having to wrestle, and that's awesome.
Yeah, just
what they
come
tried
in
to do
and
with him. Obviously, he's the biggest guy.
just come in and pop somebody with a stunner every now and then.
Yep. Oh man, well, I could probably just talk about all the stunners he's done. That'd be a fucking hour just there. All the people
Man,
he's stunned, and
it's crazy because even to this day, like what was it? WrestleMania. It was like 3 years ago when they had Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, and The
yeah,
Rock all come back. Even when his music
yep,
hits and I'm watching that WrestleMania, dude, I still get
goosebumps,
fucking
man.
chills.
Yep, goosebumps. As soon as that glass breaks, and I know it's the sad part is like I know it's coming, and it still doesn't matter. I get goosebumps every time.
Yeah.
That was like I cannot remember what it was for the life of me, but there was one time where he came back. Oh, when Mankind won the world champion against The Rock on Raw. We'll have to watch that one day. When the glass breaks and Austin comes out, and I swear to God, the camera's shaking. It's so damn loud, and it's like, oh my goodness, like if only we could go back to these times. Like I swear that because they have a hard camera that's mounted, and that damn thing is shaking because the building's moving.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, they used to call it a road warrior pop. It's an Austin pop these days. If you can hit those sort of times, um, we didn't really mention a lot of them, but like you had the TLCs that happened around this time period, and you mentioned Hardy Boys and Dudleys, but also you had Edge and Christian, and just kind of like what a revolution in tag teams, man. Like they had like their depth in tag teams was freaking phenomenal at
Yeah.
this time period.
A lot better than it
I was
is
always a
now.
tag team guys. Yeah, there's like 4 good tag teams now, and they just can't seem to keep the rest of them moving. I don't know. I don't know. It's pretty unusual. I think they just don't want to put forth the same amount of effort. I don't know.
I think that's it because it's kind of like their tag teams now is they have a singles competitor that did a run and a singles competitor that did a run and they both kind of fizzled out. So let's put them in a tag team together.
Yep. Yeah, and it just doesn't. It doesn't. Well, you're just waiting for them to break up, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, tag teams didn't break up. They were tag teams forever. And like Shawn Michaels, when he finally became a singles, he like threw Marty Jannetty through a damn plate glass window, like 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 that was like what the hell? Like that was like very unusual. It never happened where teams broke up, at least like that.
Yeah, or like the New Age Outlaws, Billy Gunn
Yeah,
and Road Dogg.
Road Dogg, yeah. Man, DX was amazing too. We haven't mentioned any of this,
Yo
but
ass better call somebody.
yeah. And them and their rivalry with the Nation. I always remember I sent you the eye roll thing that The Rock does as a meme where he's
Mhm.
like he like throws his head back. That was when The Rock was starting to find out who he is. It's amazing. Just talking about that time period with the New Age Outlaws Generation X with the New Age Outlaws versus the Nation, and it's amazing to kind of think about like when you think about that, the Nation had like 6 or 7 people. The DX had like 5 or 6, whatever it was, and all of them, they just kind of seemed to find a way to all work out, right? Like they all became big. Well, most of them became big stars. Triple H spun out of that, and The Rock spun out of that. And there's your two, like those are building blocks for the future. Like that's amazing that you were able to have that happen. And then during the ruthless aggression area or toothless aggression era, I'm sorry, you had
Mm.
a lot of these people who deserved a chance but never got it, like Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. You said,
Mhm.
uh, Kurt Angle. Then you had other people like John Cena eventually come along, and then Randy Orton, who's still wrestling to this day, which I think is crazy. Brock Lesnar, who's still wrestling as well, not as much. But that's the era I sort of fell off a little bit, even though it was good wrestling. My heyday, if you say, Chris, pick a pay per view, which one are you gonna watch? My pay per views are usually like from 88 to 92. I will watch like WrestleMania 17, but I can't watch from start to finish. I'm a lot of pick and choosing. Um,
Yeah.
and and then stuff like current product. I really like NXT, and maybe that's because I'm a fanboy or whatever. I don't know. And I like to watch the pay per views. I don't really watch a lot of SmackDown or Raw. It's just too much to watch. I don't even watch NXT. I just watch the takeovers and stuff. But I think that wrestling's in a great place. It has a good niche audience, a grouping of people who watch it, a pretty big one. Did you ever watch any WCW?
No.
No. So you didn't even really get experience to Booker T until after he was in WWE then, right?
Yeah. And when he came in, he said he
Yeah.
was the five-time, five-time,
Yeah.
five-time, five-time, five-time WCW champion, sucker.
Yep. Yeah, so you had no idea, like, what the fuck is that, you know?
Yeah. Pretty much all I knew Booker T was is he got his ass whooped in a grocery store by Stone Cold.
Yes,
Price
that was
check
so
on
funny.
Jackass.
Oh, and like dumping milk and all kinds of shit all over him.
Yeah.
Oh god, that shit was so funny. Austin, man, he had some crazy moments, didn't he?
And then you remember when he drove the beer truck in and sprayed everyone down with
Yes.
beer? And then
Yeah, and McMahon's like swimming.
Yeah, and Angle drove in the milk truck.
Yes, yeah. That's so funny. Angle is something else. What I think is unusual is that, you know, we talk about all these funny moments, but you know, we didn't really mention Undertaker much, but you know, him to have the you know, like we say, it's predetermined, but having that undefeated streak and then like those string of matches. I don't know how much of those you've watched like later on, but like when he wrestled Shawn Michaels back to back years, and then Triple H in back to back years. What's so funny is I think Triple H's best years were actually later, like 2000 and I don't know, 2000. No, I'm sorry, later than that, 2015. He had another run with the title right around then.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't watching at that time period.
It's something like that.
I took a hiatus from probably like 2003, 2004 to 2015.
I can't remember when it was. I'm sure I'm sounding like an idiot now because I don't remember. But I don't go back and watch that time period. Yeah, 2003, 2004, I kind of stopped watching too. I was like kind of getting in. That was high school time, you know. Like you said, we're starting to drive. I was getting into girls. We had other things going on. I wasn't really worried about no damn wrestling anymore. But my parents was wrestling. My parents would buy a lot of the pay per views, so I still watched pay per views for a long time until I finally fell out of it. I got into music. There was a lot of things that sort of started to kind of push us away. You were getting into Diablo around that time, and then I was getting into EverQuest. So our interests sort of changed. But like I said, recently, you know, WWE Network sort of brought me back into wrestling more than anything, and I was so thankful for it when it came around. Do you have a favorite recent pay per view? Is anyone that you think of, or any favorites besides Braun Strowman?
Nope.
No.
It's all empty up there, man.
Yeah. So you know,
like my favorite recent pay per view is the one I mentioned where The Rock and Stone Cold came back to do the intro of WrestleMania, and after that, it was all lame.
Yeah.
When Hogan said that they were
in you're one of those
the Silver Dome.
Yeah, instead of the Superdome. Yeah, when they were in Mercedes Benz. Well, Mercedes Benz Superdome in New Orleans. He said the Silver Dome in
the Silver
Pontiac,
Dome
Michigan.
brothers
in Pontiac, Michigan. Yeah, that's so funny. I think a lot of it is just a lack of connection, right? Like you just don't have the same connection to these people as you did like an Austin or a Rock. And you're one of those what they call lapsed fans. You still kind of watch it, but you're like, you know.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to watch when you're 30. You know, it's a lot easier to watch when you're 8 years old.
Well, especially when you're talking about 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, and then now there's 2 hours of NXT, 2 hours of AEW. That's like fucking.
Now I've got a fast forward button.
7, 9. Yeah. Well, Hulu's wonderful for that, by the way. Hulu, you get to watch 90 minutes of Raw instead of 3 hours. So that's wonderful. I used to still watch Raw for a long time during my, I don't know when it was, when CM Punk got back in, when CM Punk joined, and like some of that in the early 2000s, the late 2000s. So 2010, 2012, 13, somewhere in there. When he joined, I got really into it for a while there too. But yeah, it didn't last that long. My brother, that was one of the things me and my brother have always stayed connected on, was wrestling. So we could always talk about that. So that was one of the things that we enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, this was a great trip down memory lane for me. Got to talk about all the things that excite me when it comes to wrestling anyway. The Attitude Era is as good as it gets. But I think so fond. I guess it's so funny. I think so fondly of like the late 80s and the early 90s, even though it wasn't that great business wise, number wise, but it's just like, it was like my time period when I was a kid. And I guess it brings me back to that childhood. So I enjoy that. But for sure, the Attitude Era. I can't rewatch it. You know, it's so funny. I tried to rewatch one of the random pay-per-views in the Attitude Era, and I was like, I can't believe this stuff made television. You watch WrestleMania, so it's not the same. They produce at a totally different sort of quality with when it comes to WrestleMania. But if you picked and choose like No Mercy 2000 or something, you'd be like, what the hell am I watching?
Yeah.
Because there's just so much like, I don't want to say trash, but really, I think it's one of those rose colored glasses sort of things. We think so finally, like last week we talked about Arrow season 2 and how we had like this, we had in our mind what season 2 was, and then the actuality of it wasn't the same thing. That's kind of how the Attitude Era, we think about like, if we could just cut everything else out, but like The Rock, Austin, and Degeneration X, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's like totally different scenario. But yeah, man, I'm excited. I hope that we do some more of this. Maybe we won't have it as what's the word I'm looking for?
Open topic.
Yeah, maybe a little less open topic and a little more focused. But I had fun jumping around just talking about wrestling because, you know, it was a large part of my childhood. It's still, you know, a decent part of my today. And that was something we used to joke and talk about when it came to Austin. Hell, maybe one day we just talk about just Austin and some of his funny moments. But who knows what's coming down the pike, you know? We've had a lot of discussions and talks about the pike. Yeah, down the pike. You know, a turnpike. We don't have any. I don't know if we have any turnpikes in North Carolina.
I'm pretty
We have
sure
turnpikes in Florida, though.
I'm pretty sure the saying's down the pipe.
I'm gonna say pike. I'm gonna stick with what I said. It might be right.
Okay.
You might be the pipe, but I thought about turnpike. Down the pike. Down the turnpike. Maybe I'm wrong. Does it really matter? Not really. I can tell Bud's done. He's like, I'm fucking ready to end this shit. Anyway, thanks for listening. He's probably gonna cut that shit out, but I'll start over now. Anyway, thanks for listening. It's been a blast talking about old wrasslin. WRASSLIN. It's wrestling. All right, Bud. Say goodbye. We're gonna let it just have dead silence.
Yep.
You gonna leave this shit in?
Yep. I'm just gonna leave it all in.
Oh, come on. We had a blast, man. We really did. I don't know what's coming on next week. We'll figure it out some other time. Until then, sayonara.
Later, people.
On the turnpike.
Hey, everyone. If you made it this far, we appreciate you listening to the end. If you want to get a hold of us, our social links, we have a Facebook, which you can find Chris and Bud Show. Our Twitter is Chris and Bud Show 1. Chris's personal Twitter would be at Deliberate88. My personal Twitter would be at BudB88. We also have a Discord server that we've launched that's free for everyone to join. You can find the link for that on the Twitter or the Facebook page. Discord is going to be the easiest way to interact with me and Chris. Once again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.